Major, shocking problem in Michigan right now having to do with the COVID virus and the Republican Party. You have to listen to this caller from East Lansing, Michigan. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel.
Hi, thank you for all your covering. I wanted to tell you what happened in Michigan in the last week, and it was on the front page of the New York Times yesterday. I got off a State Board of Education press conference about it. Michigan COVID cases are rising. We're the leading state in the nation after New Jersey, doubled in the past 2 weeks, tripled since March 1st. That was the date that the Republican legislature forced the schools to reopen unsafely and without giving the schools the December congressional federal stimulus money. They withheld $1.5 billion, but then of the $3.5 billion, they tie-barred it to stripping county public health directors of their emergency powers. And as a result, we don't have money for testing and vaccine distribution and the upgrades to ventilation. The largest group of infected people in these new case rates are aged 10 to 19, and the hospitalization rates for parents, like age 40 to 49, it's an 800% increase in hospitalization, 633% for 23 to 39. This all came from the press conference today by the State Board of Education. So I have a question, and that is, why isn't this getting more publicity? It's a completely unnecessary harm to force children to suffer from a health harm. The question is not whether to reopen, it's whether to reopen unsafely by leaving money unspent. The GOP leader, the Senate leader, is the problem. According to Ellen Kogan-Lipton on our state board, she was in the state house. She's a Harvard law grad, and she said GOP leader Shirkey basically challenged Governor Whitmer, our Democratic governor, to a fistfight, but also is using this money by withholding it to weaponize children to get other things that deprive the governor of her powers because he disagrees with her use of those powers in a public health pandemic. The last thing I'll say is that our governor had put in place through executive order a water shutoff moratorium, which prevented the shutoff of water to over 100,000 homes and possibly as many as 200,000 people who couldn't afford to pay their water bills because they were unemployed. And in a pandemic, that's a public health necessity. Well, now the water shutoff moratorium is going to phase out March 31st because by one vote, the Supreme Court invalidated her emergency powers under a GOP lawsuit. And these same people who've had water shutoff moratorium in place have a rear-vision and face red tagging of their homes and homelessness, because when your water's shut off now, as cities will go and do, you lose your chance to live in your house when they put a red tag in, and then you have to move out, or it's a misdemeanor to stay there. So we're criminalizing people not being able to pay their water bill, and we're making the pandemic worse whether you're at home or whether you're at the school. And it's a completely artificial crisis because the GOP is in the state Senate and in the House are blocking money that bipartisan our federal Congress has given us. So I wanted to raise the profile on that because I really am quite surprised that it hasn't gotten more national media attention.
That is mind-boggling. Patrick, I just made a note. I'm going to, after we get off the air, go trying to track down the information that you just laid out. Was it the Michigan Supreme Court that undid the water shutoff ban, or was it the U.S. Supreme Court?
So the Michigan Supreme Court made a ruling, and the ruling was by one vote to declare the governor's use of her emergency powers to exceed the scope of those powers. However, the governor had an alternate set of powers, and she put those in place under the 1918 Spanish flu set of laws that allows the Michigan Department of Health director to allow for the same exercise of power. So when she pivoted to use a second source of her power, the Republicans in the state legislature began to threaten to withhold funding. So they withheld the money that Congress gave from the December federal stimulus, and only recently have they voted to give $3.5 billion, but they tie-barred a bunch of that to stripping county health department powers, so the governor had to veto it. So more than half of that money hasn't been given out. And then the Republicans threatened to withhold school funding, the basic lifeblood of local school districts, if they didn't reopen and have 20 hours and comply with a series of mandates. So what we're having is a bipartisan standoff between our state legislature, dominated by the Republicans, and our Democratic governor. And the harm is a huge change in public health policy that's putting us at the top of the list as worst now in the country just in the last month in terms of case rates. When we were near the top, we had the lower cases, we had less hospitalizations, we were doing better than other states. And I just wanted to lay that out for you.
Yeah, I have 3 brothers who live in Michigan. I have friends who live in Michigan, and there's a little listserv that a bunch of people that I went to college with have been talking about what you're talking about right now, although without all the detail. But their freak out is that case rates are exploding, and it seems to be tied to this forced reopening of the schools. And the thing that just to throw one more piece into this mix, Patrick, and this is research that is published but not yet peer-reviewed. So I put that caveat on, and I tweeted a link to the original research earlier today. And so if you want to track this down, it's on my Twitter feed at Thom_Hartmann. But the reason, now this is all subject to more science in the future, but it appears that the main reason why the COVID virus does not infect children, or rarely infects children, is that the principal vehicle that it uses to penetrate cells to produce an infection is a protein called ACE2. It's angiotensin. It's the angiotensin. I forget all the words, but angiotensin is this protein that the body produces that regulates blood pressure, and children don't produce this. It starts getting produced in puberty and after puberty. And the older you are, the more ACE2 receptors you have, and the more likely you are to have high blood pressure, and thus the more vulnerable you are to COVID infection. They used to think it was because children's immune systems were naive and just treated it as just another disease. They're increasingly thinking it's because kids don't have these ACE2 receptors. Well, this study that was just published, the title of it is the B1351 and the P1 variants extend SARS-CoV-2 host range to mice. And what they're pointing out is that these 2 mutations, the South African mutation, which is the P1, and I'm not sure what the other one is, these 2 mutations are now able to infect an animal that has no ACE2 proteins. It has no ACE2 receptors. And mice don't have this.
On your exact point, we have the B117 virus in Michigan. We have 15% of all cases. We have a greater number of those cases and a greater rate of growth than any state. And when the UK variant, the B117, which we now have in Michigan, largely from 3 prison outbreaks, but now it's spread throughout Washtenaw County. We have all over Michigan State campus in East Lansing. Now that we have the B117 variant, we had a big outbreak in Livingston County. We believe that we're in a position like the Austrian study documented December 23rd that forced the rethinking in Germany and across Europe and in the UK, because that study, which was in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, showed that children were spreading at the same rate as adults. And they were showing
because these new variants don't require an ACE2 receptor in order to infect somebody.
So I don't know if you all are going to get the UK variant in other parts of the country, but we have it in Michigan, and it's changing the game for us.
Yeah, it's showing up all over the country. It's just that I think that we're, as a nation, in terms of the slope, the curve of spread of this virus, I think with these variants right now, we are where we were with the original wild virus back in April. And that's not a good place to be.